Okay, so I apologize. Unfortunately, we're not able to be live today. There seems to be an issue with Facebook, but we are recording this and we will be putting it back on Facebook. Again, my name is Melissa Fecak, and I am here with Meghan Bradley and Tricia Elliott. And we're going to be speaking today about how you can prepare yourselves for a divorce. So one of the things I wanted to talk to you about today is something called equitable distribution. So what that involves is it's basically the division of assets and also debts. So what you should be mindful of is that just because you're getting divorced doesn't mean that one party gets everything and the other party gets nothing. It is truly an equitable type of distribution. And so with that, what I want to do is give you some ideas of what you can be thinking about and what you should be maybe gathering either before you get filed for divorce or go to see a divorce attorney, or what you should be doing kind of in preparation of a divorce. So one of the things is your house is probably your biggest asset, and it is also probably your biggest liability. So one of the things that you can do now is, one, get any documentation you have with regards to your outstanding mortgage to find out exactly how much you are paying a month, what you currently owe, any information you may have on that. Now, with that, if you're thinking you may want to buy out your spouse out of the house, you may also want to talk to a mortgage broker about what is your ability to pre-qualify for a mortgage or what you will need to do to qualify for a mortgage. Even if you don't have an agreement, it's a good idea to just look into whether even you'd be eligible to refinance or to obtain a mortgage to buy your spouse out. Because if you're not going to be eligible, or if it's something that's really not realistic, then there's no point in discussing it any further, and you may want to look into other options as to what to do with the house. On that end, with regards to the house, you may also want to try to find out what your house may be worth. Now, it may be very difficult at this time to get it appraised, but you can certainly contact a realtor and find out if maybe you can get a current market analysis and look at what are other houses in your area going for, or what they have sold for recently. You may also be able to look at Zillow. I mean, it's not an accurate, but it might give you at least an idea or a range of what your house may be worth. And again, that can be very helpful in determining as to whether you really want to stay in the home, or if maybe you want to move into somewhere else, or maybe if your spouse is wanting to buy you out, what the amount is probably appropriate for that buyout amount. So again, it's a great time to gather all that information because you're probably home and you're able to collect this information very easily. Another thing that you want to do is look at what are your debts. So you may want to start collecting copies of credit card statements, looking at bank statements if you have any bank loans, looking at your student loans as to what you currently owe outstanding on that. Look at other obligations you may have. For example, if a family member has loaned you money to assist you with a divorce, well, make sure that that's memorialized in some kind of writing, making sure that you have that documentation to follow that as well, including maybe copies of canceled checks that they have handed to you for you to borrow money from. Likewise, if you have lent any money to anyone, you want to get documentation with regard to that as well. So to make sure that you have, again, this information, so when you are dealing with this issue, you have it all ahead of time, and you can start talking about that without having to scramble and try to find all that information. Another idea that you may want to think about is looking for the titles of vehicles. That often could be a challenge, and sometimes people are, again, trying to find where all those documents are. So while you're home, take that opportunity to identify, okay, here are the title documents for the vehicles. So that way, if you know, if you need to maybe transfer title to your other spouse, or also, again, just see that information available. So when it is time to finalize all those documents, you at least know where everything is located. You also want to get a copy of any bank statements. And that doesn't just mean your checking account and savings account, but also if there's any IRAs, if there's any retirement accounts, getting statements for that, getting statements for your pensions or any other investments that you may have. So collecting all that data And again, you don't necessarily have to have 10 years available, but maybe getting, the last couple of years or the last year at least of that information available to you as well. Again, this is all things that when you go to an attorney is going to be requesting all these documents. So if you have them ahead of time, it's definitely going to help you. It's going to save you money and time, and certainly save you some aggravation. So with that, I am now going to pass it on to Meghan, and Meghan is going to be speaking to you about what you should do to prepare for a support.
Hi, everybody. So today I just want to talk a little bit about what you need to do to prepare to talk about the issues of both child support and spousal support. In New Jersey, both of those issues need to be dealt with in the event that you have children, depending on the circumstances of the case. So let's start with both of those together. So first, you just have to look at the income of both of the spouses. It's helpful to gather W-2s, 1099s, tax returns, at least for a year or two or even 3, to see what each of the wage earners has been earning. And then it's also helpful in some instances when certain spouses are on disability, sometimes there are payments paid on behalf of children. So there's other income coming in that can be part of the equation of support going forward. So first of all, you're gathering the income information so that you know what there is in terms of what there is to go around. What generally takes a little bit more time is taking a look at what your future spending plan is going to look like. So when I meet with a client, I always want that person to consider, what is my life going to look like going forward? Where am I going to be living? What are my expenses going to be? And it's not easy, but it really can be done. And when you get a handle on what your future expenses might look like, what would make you happy in terms of your future life, it can give you a level of calm as you go through the unknowns of a divorce proceeding. So for instance, there's 3 major categories of expenses that you should be considering. One is shelter expenses. So are you going to be maintaining the marital residence? And if so, can you qualify, as Melissa said, to transfer the entire mortgage into your own name? And you can reach out now to mortgage brokers to see what your income and credit will support in terms of a mortgage going forward. If you're thinking not in terms of buying out on the marital residence, maybe you're thinking of buying something comparable or something smaller in the same area. You might use the time now to go online and take a look at available homes to purchase. And again, mortgage brokers can help you ascertain what you can afford down the road with some basic information. You may also not want to buy right away because you're not sure where you're going to be, in which case taking the time now to look at rental opportunities is really great. You can go online, you can look at what's available in your area, what the rents are, what the utilities are as part of that process. So I recommend trying to look around in the areas that you're interested in and get a sense for what those costs are going to look like. In addition to your mortgage and your rent, you have your basic utilities that may or may not differ all that much from place to place, but you're going to want to put that together as well because they do add up, and it's going to be helpful to know what they are. You also want to look at a second category of expenses, and that's your auto expenses. Do you have an auto loan? Do you have an auto lease? How long will that go for? What does your insurance look like? What does it look like for you and maybe a child or 2 children as opposed to a family? And you can call up your insurance broker as well and get estimates for different policies, what it would look like going forward, so that you have that information. Often it can be expensive to insure young adults on your policies, so it's helpful to shop that around. If you do that now and get some sense for where the range of expenses is, that'll give you a really good jump start. And then there's the third category of personal expenses, which is, it can be very difficult to figure out if you don't have an outline. And so we often use something called a case information statement, which has very specific categories of expenses to help jog your brain into what you're actually spending. So, for instance, there's several categories of food, toiletries, that kind of thing, cleaning supplies, all of that. What do you think those are going to be going forward? Then there's medical insurance, medical, dental, and vision. And sometimes spouses are on a family plan, but once the divorce is final, the 2 spouses are going to have separate insurance policies. You can also inquire of insurance professionals now as to what those costs might look like, what type of policy, what kind of unreimbursed expenses there will be. Same thing for dental and for prescription coverage. And then you have your basic clothing and your entertainment expenses. Do you belong to a gym? Do your kids have extracurricular activities? If so, what are they? Break that down by season. Try to get a sense for has been going on and what you think might continue, so you can maybe break out your kids' extracurricular activities and entertainment expenses separately, so you have a good sense for what they are. Also vacations. If you've taken vacations in the past and you're considering you don't really know what you can do going forward, but it's a good idea to look at what your past expenses have been, kind of see how many trips you took, where you went to the shore for the weekend, did you go away on a trip by plane once a year, what did they look like? If you can gather all that up by looking at old credit card statements, that will be helpful to get a sense for what you were doing and maybe what you could do in the future. Childcare, what are those expenses? How long do you think those will go on for? Are they provided through the school? Are they provided through a provider at your home? Or do you pay your parents or your in-laws to take care of your kids? All of those expenses, if you can put that together. All of that will be helpful to put together a package to say, look, if I'm going to live in this apartment with my 2 children going forward, for instance, what is that picture going to look like? And the more detail you can put together now by looking at what you've been spending and looking at your options, the more information you're armed with, the better you're going to be able to get your arms around what you're going to need going forward. And so then you can get back to the conversation of how are we going to share income so that we can all live in our happily going forward. So I think that's more or less an outline of how to gather information about your budget, your spending plan, and your income to address these alimony and child support issues. There are some laws around child support and alimony in the state of New Jersey, and we're not going to get into that today, but we would like to do another webinar to give some basic more information about what set of laws apply to each of these categories in terms of a divorce to help you think further about it down the road. Thanks.
So I'm just going to take a few moments now to talk about if you have children and you're planning on getting a divorce or separating, what you need to be thinking about regarding a parenting plan. Let me just first say that a neighbor nearby is mowing their lawn, and so you may at different times hear that in the background, and I apologize. This is life right now, right? So this is what happens when we're at home. So that aside, hopefully you can hear me clearly during the few moments I'm going to take right here. So one of the first things I have couples begin to think about is, what do they want their weekly time with their children to look like? This day and age that we live in now, parenting time essentially is split 50-50. It wasn't always like that, but nowadays, apart from extenuating circumstances, most parents do share their time 50-50. So you want to begin thinking about what that looks like practically regarding your work schedule, your spouse's schedule, and then the children's school or activity schedule. What would work best for you? The beauty of creating a parenting plan through the mediation process or the collaborative process is we can be as creative as possible with coming up with a plan that's specific to you, rather than following some sort of state or court ordered plan. And so we can be creative in that way. And so you and your spouse can begin to think through together or separately what might work. That is something that we will have to address, and we address that right away. The next thing I always want folks to be thinking about is holidays, both the major holidays and the minor holidays. So major holidays would be those ones that come to mind right away. Thanksgiving, Christmas, Christmas Eve, New Year's Eve, Passover, Easter. They tend to be the bigger holidays that people want to spend with their children. So you want to begin to think about, what would that look like to share that holiday, either by splitting the day or alternating years. And then the minor holidays tend to be Memorial Day, 4th of July, Labor Day, those holidays where people oftentimes do barbecues, go down the shore, things like that. So those are things that you want to be thinking about, because that too will be addressed. And then moving on from holidays, I always ask folks to think about breaks. Winter break, when you have kids or college age, winter break, spring break, and then summertime, when most kids are not in school. What would you like that to look like? What does it need to look like in light of your work schedule? So begin thinking in that way. And then on top of that would be vacation. How much vacation time a year would you like to be able to spend with your kids? 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks? You begin thinking about that. And that doesn't necessarily mean going away, but it could. A lot of times people just like to have their kids at home where they're off for the week together. So begin thinking about that. And then also the idea of how much of a notice you would want from your spouse that he or she is taking your kids on vacation. I want to know 6 weeks in advance, 30 days, 90 days, so that I can prepare myself mentally or emotionally that I won't be having my children for my regular parenting time during that time frame. Those are important things. The other thing that I wanted to mention as well is birthdays, both your birthday, the parents, and then the kids' birthdays. How would you like to address those moving forward? Do you want to spend it all together as a family? Do you want to have your kids half of the day, all of the day? Or some folks like to just follow along with the parenting schedule as it is. Something to think about. And then lastly, and oftentimes can be the most challenging, is to figure out the best way to communicate once you're divorced or separated. Because communication will always be necessary in order to care best for the kids and in order to not allow the children become the middleman, relaying messages to mom and dad. Fortunately enough, in this day and age, we have so many ways of communication. If in person is difficult, it's just not comfortable, people can make phone calls. If that's difficult, if that is emotionally challenging, we have text, we have email, and then of course we have this. We have video where you can touch base and talk about your kids. So those are all things that you can be thinking about in advance of moving forward with a divorce, or if right now you're considering getting divorced and you just want to get all your ducks in a row. So these are just things that get the ball rolling. And I hope our time today was helpful in at least getting those basics out there so that you can prepare yourself as best you can, like Melissa said, to save yourself some time and money, which is always best when you're making a huge life decision like this. And so I know our goal is to continue every Friday at noontime offering these types of educational webinars so that people can be better prepared if they decide to divorce or if they are already divorced but having ongoing issues with their former spouse. And so we look forward to talking to you next week again.
And Tricia, do you want to just give your website information so people know how to contact you?
Absolutely. Thanks, Melissa. So my website is my name, www.triciaelliott.com. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Great. And Megan, how about you give your information as well?
Yes, so I'm Meghan Bradley. I'm a partner with DiLorenzo, Bradley & Banfi in Morristown, New Jersey. Our website is www.dbbnjlaw.com.
Thanks. And I am Melissa Fecak, and my firm is South Jersey Divorce Solutions. It's sjdivorcesolutions.com. And again, you can find all of us on the web and reach out to any of us to speak to us about these topics further. Thank you very much.
Thank you.